Guys, Boxing Gossip here. In this video I'm looking to talk about Dillian Whyte versus Ian Lewison. Quite a few people have reached out to me asking for a few opinions of what can only be described as a heated press conference today. Now let me start from the beginning. Ian Lewison, I remember, and it's maybe unfortunate that this is my abiding memory of him, but Ian Lewison I remember as being a disappointment when favourite on Prizefighter some years ago. Since then I've kind of viewed him as a guy who really has been lacking any momentum in his career. He's a guy who's been out of the ring on and off for years. He's a guy who doesn't really seem to have been involved in the big fights, and you know, here he is today. He's 35 years old. I appreciate he had a recent fight in the Far East, but by and large he's been inactive. He appears, at least visually to my eye, to be very overweight. At the press conference today he said he was 22 stone. Whether or not that's true, maybe we'll find out next week. But kind of Ian Lewison I've viewed as a guy who is someone who hasn't made the most of his career. Someone who was viewed as an exciting prospect, someone who was viewed as a person to follow, but for one reason or another the career just hasn't developed into the way that potentially it could have done. Now, I was quite surprised when this Lewison-Whyte fight was made, if I'm honest. I actually, and this is probably my naivety here, I actually viewed Ian Lewison as quite a big step down from David Allen. I appreciate Ian Lewison won some sort of WBO regional title when he fought in the Far East, but you know, really Ian Lewison was not someone who I overly viewed as a threat at British level. There's multiple guys I would have probably had ahead of Ian Lewison in terms of a fight for the British title. But what's interesting is a few people in the boxing community, and a few people who certainly I respect, have come out and have really found this to be quite a good fight. Hatman, which as you guys will know is a big YouTube boxing channel. Hatman rates Ian Lewison's chance. He seems to think that this is a good fight and that this is not a one-way street. A few other people I know are picking Lewison to win the fight. And I think when we look at Lewison, he's a guy who, by all accounts, has a very decent amateur pedigree, which is not something that you would necessarily deduce if you only watch the highlight clip of him. But I've researched it and I've heard what people have said, and the guy actually beat Odin Solis. The guy beat David Price. The guy beat Robert Hellenius in the amateurs. You know, he's gone out and he's beaten some decent names in the amateurs. As far as I'm aware, Lewison's never had a chin problem. He's never been hurt. I'm not aware of him being dropped in fights. And he also carries above average power. Clearly he's a big guy. He comes to bang. And I mean, I've always viewed Lewison, if I'm honest, as a one-dimensional slugger-brawler type, but now we get into it, his amateur pedigree suggests that there is more to him than that, and I guess this is his really big opportunity. So maybe he shouldn't be overlooked in this fight. You know, Dillian Whyte, he's a very good fighter, but it's kind of hard to really ascertain at this stage just how high an upside Dillian Whyte actually has. A lot of his recent performances has been unconvincing, and I know a lot of people were very surprised that David Allen was able to take him to distance in their fight, and at times potentially cause some troubles. So maybe it's an interesting fight. Maybe it's more of an interesting fight than I had initially anticipated. I think for me the big concern from Ian Lewison's perspective is I appreciate he's got this amateur pedigree, but fundamentally he does seem to be a guy who comes for a scrap. He's a guy who throws wild punches. He's a guy who throws, aims to knock his opponent out. And I think Dillian Whyte may have shown in the David Allen fight that he's working on his boxing skills. And I would expect Dillian Whyte maybe to be smart in this fight for the first 2 or 3 rounds. Try and avoid getting involved into an absolute war. Avoid being sucked into a dogfight early against Ian Lewison when he's most dangerous, which apparently would be in the first couple of rounds. Now, Don Charles at the press conference, so we'll come on to the press conference in a second, but Don Charles said that Ian Lewison, Dillian Whyte's best chance of beating Ian Lewison would be to take him outside of the first 4 rounds. And I think Charles is spot on in that sense. You know, Lewison, 35, inactive, looks very, very heavy indeed. He's going to come out throwing bombs with bad intentions from the first round. Dillian Whyte showed in the Dave Allen fight he can box a bit. He showed he can go 10 rounds, and you know, fundamentally, I'm just not sure that Ian Lewison has had a disciplined enough career and enough notice for this fight that he's going to be able to live with Dillian Whyte in the middle to late rounds if it goes that far. And whilst Lewison maybe has shown good power in his fights, and whilst he's not shown any chin problems, it's actually fair to say that Lewison's fought at a fairly low level in the pros. Now, I appreciate that Dillian Whyte has hardly got a sort of top 5 resume in the context of the heavyweight division, but nevertheless, I kind of believe that the experience that Dillian Whyte has gained against David Allen, against Anthony Joshua, against Brian Minto, that sort of type of opponent, I kind of believe will have brought him on a bit. And momentum is so key in boxing. Dillian Whyte signed with Matchroom. He's the home fighter. He's the guy being pushed in the world title direction. He's the one who's the marketable guy, potentially a pay-per-view fighter. Whereas Ian Lewison has been brought in here as a short notice opponent when he's out of shape, when he's not being consistently active. And I think that momentum is key. So, I respect the fact that people are highlighting Lewison's amateur career. I respect the fact that Lewison's got power, that he seems to have a good chin. And maybe we shouldn't underestimate Ian Lewison here. But fundamentally, with the momentum and with the upside, you're going to have to side with Dillian Whyte. Ian Lewison is not a guy I can see forging away into the top 20 of the world. And Dillian Whyte, just for my money, has a little bit more and has slightly more to offer in the heavyweight division. So I'm going for Dillian Whyte in this fight. And I do think Whyte will win by stoppage. This is for the British title. It's a 12-round fight. And I just don't think Lewison's going to be conditioned to go 12 rounds here. He's not a young athletic guy like David Allen was. He's an older guy. He's a very, very heavy and active guy. And I think Whyte will get to him. And I think Whyte will probably be smart for the first 2 or 3 rounds, stay out of trouble, try and avoid getting into an out-and-out war. And then I think Whyte will be able to cut him down, chop down that tree in the middle of rounds. As for the press conference today, Dillian Whyte's a character. He's always involved in fiery occasions and fiery press conferences. If I'm completely honest, this press conference wasn't one that overly entertained me. I really enjoy the WWE style build-up to fights, but I enjoy it when it's clever. I enjoy it when there's a bit of a storyline. I enjoy it when the banter is a bit sophisticated. Today, I've got to say this was pretty basic stuff. Eddie Hearn looked uncomfortable there, and I think I'd be uncomfortable as well if I was there. It was just 2 big guys swearing at each other, making very childish insults at each other. It was really, really base stuff without real intellect or wit on display as far as I'm concerned. And we know from previous Dillian Whyte encounters that Dillian Whyte is actually a very smart guy who's capable of highly engaging and highly entertaining press conference behaviour. But today it was just, for me, the conversation was just too low grade. I guess it's personal choice and it kind of depends what you like. But it didn't really hype the fight for me. And all of this bad blood, as I said, it didn't really do it for me today. I guess I'm more hyped for this fight than I've been in previous weeks because people are actually picking Lewison, which surprised me. I thought this would be perceived to be a fairly one-sided matchup, but clearly there's people who are sensing an upset here and think that Ian Lewison may be being overlooked. So let me know your thoughts on this, people. Who are you picking to win this fight? Are we going to see traces of Ian Lewison's amateur pedigree in this fight? Is it going to be a 3 or 4 round shootout? Could Dillian Whyte have his work cut out here? I'm inclined to think Dillian Whyte will box smart for a few rounds, wear Ian Lewison out and then stop him. But am I missing something? Are you excited for the fight? Do you think it's going to be a competitive fight? And what's your predictions? Do leave them in the comment section below. If you've enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate it if you take the time to hit the thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel, please do subscribe. I'll be sure to cover this one on on Fight Night. Many thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate it as always.